Story 1. 6 pretty petals. I woke up that Saturday morning to an unexpected breeze, cool and pleasant, against my cheek. I kept a fan on myself while I slept during the warmer seasons, but the fan was packed deep in my closet during the heart of winter. I wiped my eyes and looked towards the source of the breeze, a yellow blur block some of the blinding light that broke through the sheer curtains. As my vision regained clarity, the yellow blur morphed into a lovely flower with 6 large yellow petals. Before college, I would have been terrified of waking up to a strange flower on my chest, but maturity left me more curious than scared. After meeting my best friend, Chelsea, a female sleight-of-hand magician, I had grown more willing to accept the unexpected. The flower was part of some intricate trick she would surprise me with later in the week. It was the only explanation that made sense, therefore I assumed it to be the correct one. I made it through high school without uttering the love word to any of my boyfriends, as my friends were so hasty to brag about doing. When it came to romance, it wasn't something I let take over my life. My reputation around campus as an ice queen wasn't entirely accurate, but it didn't bother me. It helped me avoid the dating scene and keep focus on my GPA. My plan was set, and I was the only one responsible for executing it. I was not a prude, but I was a realist. No spontaneous college guy would waste random romantic gestures on the control freak, even if there was interest. A warm fire or a heated blanket were more romantic than any flower this far north. Winter wasn't for color, it was for comfort. Still, it was a pretty flower. The flowers seemed healthy, but I could smell nothing. My nose was ice cold, and a fresh gust of air made me very aware of the liquid that was dripping from it. The breeze was coming from the window, open about an inch. I closed the window and touched my nose. My hands, warm from being tucked under my pillow, recoiled from the touch of my cold nose. It was no wonder I couldn't smell the flower. I set the flower on my knitstand, hoping a long hot shower would clear my head and warm up my nose enough to smell it. I saw a notification for a few unanswered texts from Chelsea, but I needed to wake up first. Chelsea was the sober sorority sister of Phi Sigma Sigma and my best friend. She had never touched a drop of alcohol in her life and never planned to, though she had a sense of humor about it. Why? Was a question she heard often and used as a way to challenge her ability to think quick. She claimed various rules of various religions at first before moving on to secret societies' cult tenets, forcing her to keep clean for her master. For the past month, she has used the questions as a study aid for her death and society class. She would claim that the victims of insert serial killers named here were drunk, and that she didn't want to make herself an easy target. After recounting some of the more gruesome details from memory, even the most practiced partiers would spend more time eyeing their drinks and fellow party guests with suspicion than imbibing. She was passing the class with flying colors. Chelsea was a sleight-of-hand magician, and Penn and Teller were her idols. Neither had ever taken a drink of alcohol, and neither ever would, for no reason other than they didn't want to. She liked the idea and spent her time practicing sleight of hand by herself, while other kids her age practiced the handsy stuff on each other. I was the control freak. She was the perfectionist, and both of us avoided deep relationships in lieu of our own personal interests and hobbies. We were best friends a week into English 301. Chelsea was the designated driver, cock blocker, and general caretaker when the Phi Sigma 6 went to parties. She asked for three things as payment: gas money, permission to perform magic tricks for the guys who struck out with us, and allowance to film any embarrassing shit we did with a clause that none of it ended up on YouTube. I never got drunk enough to go viral, but New Year's Eve was the one night of the year I caged the control freak completely. That Saturday was January 1st. I assumed Chelsea was the reason I woke up with a cracked window and a strange flower instead of a cracking headache and a strange frat boy. None of the normal signs of a hangover dragged me down, and silently praised Chelsea for whichever of her magic tricks had prevented the normal symptoms. I remembered nothing. The hot shower was fantastic. The hair on my legs was longer than I expected, considering I had shaved prior to party the night before. An ex-boyfriend used to swear that his facial hair always seemed to grow in thicker and quicker after a night of heavy drinking. Not caring much about the cause, I recycled the diagnosis and slathered conditioner on my legs. After I washed and conditioned my hair, I turned the shower head to pulse and stood under the water, enjoying the sensation of water massaging the back of my neck while my hair draped over my face like a hot towel. One of the perks of a private dorm room. No roommate, no sharing the hot water. After I brushed my hair and teeth, I returned to my bed to check my missed messages, and 3 loud, rapid knocks pounded at my door. After the third knock, a sheet of paper slid through the gap at the bottom of my door. This was how the sorority passed, along warnings about secret dorm inspections or frivolous gossip. We didn't trust texting. It was quick and anonymous. No one ever knew who was knocking. For secretive note passing, those 3 knocks were obnoxious in volume and left a feeling of creeping dread clinging to each and every goosebump that ran up my spine. That cold cape of unease never stayed with me until the end. Much later, I realized what was so unsettling about the situation. 1. My door was the only one that had been knocked on. 2. I had heard no footsteps approaching or leaving, for that matter, even though the floors in our building creaked if somebody so much as coughed. I left the note on the floor as if to punish it for ruining my calm. I checked that the padlock was in the locked position, a useless but helpful symbol of safety, before I picked up my phone to check the text messages from Chelsea. The knocking returned most of the pre-shower tension. My subconscious would expect more knocking for hours just to avoid surprise if it happened again. The stress made it impossible to relax. I paced around the room as I checked my phone. First, I caught up on emails, the last of which was also from Chelsea. It contained an image that failed to download no matter how many times I touched the retry button. I let it be and scrolled through the text messages instead. These were the last few messages on my phone. Me. See you in 5, doll. December 31st, 2014, 8:29 p.m. Chelsea. Who is that guy? Why is he trying to give you a flower? Can I do a trick on him, or does he have potential? December 31st, 2014, 9:42 p.m. Me. Says his name is Ray. Never seen him before, but Dana thinks he's cute, so no tricks yet. Dak. 31, 2014, 9:44 p.m. Chelsea. Do his eyes look strange too? You. Or are you too drunk to notice? December 31st, 2014, 9:45 p.m. Chelsea. Brit. Where the hell did you go? December 31st, 2014, 9:59 p.m. Chelsea. Hello, are you in the bathroom? You need to practice so you aren't puking drunk after one angry orchard. Just tell me if you find a ride or not. This party is Alami. December 31st, 2014, 10:49 p.m. Chelsea. Brit. Seriously, where are you? I can't find Melody. Or Sarah. Ray keeps looking at me and his eyes are seriously fucked up. I'm getting creeped out. January 1st, 2015, 1:11 a.m. Chelsea. Holy VKBRT, I just found Melody. She's passed out or SMTHNG. Where are you? January 1st, 2015, 1:42 a.m. Chelsea. Brit. ANSW Army. January 1st, 2015, 1:56 a.m. Chelsea. 6 Lova Lipstos Devo Talza Schesfeld Esto Vosniznen and January 1st, 2015, 3 a.m. By the time I read the last message, the chills in my back had returned tenfold. My frantic pacing caused my thighs to ache. I made a mental note to call Melody later and make sure she was feeling better. But I needed to see Chelsea. Chelsea didn't just lose her cool, ever. Getting us safely back to our rooms, passed out or otherwise, was what Chelsea did. She didn't freak out over it, especially not to the point of it silencing her inner grammar Nazi. She had grown used to me shortening a couple of words and not using capital letters. But anything beyond that meant repercussions. More terrifying than those 3 knocks were the last 3 text messages, the first broken and misspelled, like a drunk text sent to an ex-booty call. She would have ignored me for a weekend on principle had I sent it to her the second, all capital letters, with exclamation points for emphasis. That would have earned me a public conversation where she yelled at me just so my ears and shame could be uncomfortable, as her eyes had been reading it. And the third message, one long string of lowercase letters, gibberish at first, but after reading it back a few times it repeats the same message 6 times. 6 lovely petals. Does she love me, or does she not? I had no idea what the fuck that was supposed to mean, or why Chelsea would have sent it. My phone beeped and I had a fear spasm, as if I'd run into an invisible wall. A small arrow appeared at the top of my cell phone screen signifying a successful download. I forced myself to stand still and calm down before I opened it. The morning was spiraling into some sort of hell thanks to my inner control freak. I hoped a cricket chirping wouldn't cause me to piss myself at the rate I was going. The download was the image Chelsea had sent me, called 9:15-6 petals. I don't know how long I sat with my thumb hovering over that text, unsure whether or not I had the guts left to open that image. I had to talk myself into thinking that it was some elaborate prank on Chelsea's part to get back at me for disappearing on her last night. It took me longer to open it than I'm comfortable admitting. The picture proved that Chelsea was not responsible for the flower. It was a picture of the 6 of us, the Phi Sigma 6. From left to right, we were Melody, Sarah, Jolene, Anastasia, Chelsea, and me. All of us had yellow flowers behind our ears, and each one of those yellow bastards had 6 petals. I glanced at the flower on my nightstand for a moment. Perhaps it was the fear or seeing that all 6 of us had received one. But it no longer seemed beautiful or special. I sure as hell didn't have the urge to smell it anymore. Unable to keep still, I began pacing again. I glanced at the piece of paper on the floor. I wanted to look at that piece of paper about as much as I wanted to smell the flower, though I knew I would eventually look. I had to look to take control. I looked back to the picture. 6 of us smiling and sure of the shenanigans the night still held. My eyes moved past our flower-framed faces to the mirror behind us. In it, I saw the man who had taken the picture. He held Chelsea's phone level with his chin. The flash in the mirror left little of his face recognizable and made his hand look thin, almost skeletal. His eyes, unaffected by the flash, were completely visible. Chelsea had been right about Ray. His eyes were as disturbing as Chelsea's texts described. Something was wrong with them. The whole of each eye looked black. Most people would have assumed the man wore contacts, but the blackness looked like deep, empty holes. The irises floated against the blackness like the rims of buckets floating at the bottom of the well. All 6 of us had red eye from the flash, but Ray's eyes were matte. The flash didn't just not touch them. It seemed to actively avoid them. It could have been bad Photoshop. I wish I could say that at any point I had believed it was bad Photoshop. Whether it was the growing fear in my gut or a trick from staring at the screen too long, I saw the eyes move, those pale irises staring right at me, and let out a high-pitched shriek as I shoved the phone deep within the depths of my pillow pile. I was done with cryptic texts and strange images. I couldn't stop pacing. Again, I wanted to convince myself that Chelsea was trying out a new, albeit disturbing, magic trick on me. She had a tendency to surprise me with small pieces of tricks instead of running meat through the patter and show of it all. This was the finale of a goat trick. It would explain the black, hollow eyes that light avoided, how the text set up finding the picture, how the picture seemed to download on its own. When I finished the text, it all made sense if I could accept that Chelsea, as a magician, had secrets that she just couldn't share. Once I saw the trick pieced together, it would all make sense. Any other truth would break me at some point. I had stopped pacing and had picked up the piece of paper. I was staring at the blank backside of it as I left my thoughts. Confused emotions made me dizzy. Fear and reason, the angel and a devil, on my shoulder, fought for control of my hands, fought for control of that precious, terrifying sheet of paper. The devil on my shoulder cooed that turning it over would reveal the secret and give me the answer Chelsea could not. The angel, meek but loud, screamed that turning it over meant I could never not turn it over. I had always thought that my controlling nature made me a rational person, if a bit distant. But I was learning that fear turns a person's every trait into a weapon. I was as naive and stupid as any horror movie character I had yelled at over the years, because I could not let myself remain naive and stupid. I had to know. To take control, I turned the piece of paper over. 5 confirmed dead. 1 still missing after serial killer strikes campus New Year's Eve party by Neil Palmer, January 3rd, 2015. It has been 3 days since the Acacia Fraternity New Year's Eve party ended, and 2 more students have been tragically added to the list of deceased. The bodies of Anastasia Higgins and Chelsea Fogg were found in their respective dorm rooms this morning. Despite campus being under 24-hour surveillance and closed to all known police and federal authorities as of January 1st. The rooms of all 6 sorority sisters have been secured and are under observation. Melody Simmons and Sarah Rowland were found on the morning of January 1st by pledges assigned to aid them after the New Year's Eve party. Jolene Roberts' body appeared in her bed the next day. There were no signs of forced entry and no reports of suspicious activity from officers on duty. Ms. Higgins and Ms. Fogg each had strange yellow flowers on their chests, as with the previous victims. 2 of the petals on Ms. Fogg's flower had been removed, leaving 4 petals. 1 petal had been removed from a Ms. Higgins, leaving 5. Though the flower has not yet been identified, the picture below, pulled this morning off of Ms. Fogg's phone, showed that each flower has 6 petals. Authorities suspect that whoever was responsible for the flowers may have information and urge anybody with information to call 911 or the provided anonymous tip line as quickly as possible. In the middle of the page was the picture that Chelsea had emailed me, displaying the 6 of us smiling with those fucking flowers behind our ears. I wouldn't let myself look at Ray's face again. I forced myself to read on, despite tears blurring my vision. Brittany Davidson, the last member of the Phi Sigma 6, remains unaccounted for. If criminal profiler theories that this is the work of a serial killer can be trusted, Ms. Davidson represents one more potential victim. Finding her is paramount to both saving her life and catching the person responsible for the deaths of her 5 sisters. If anybody has any information regarding the whereabouts of Brittany Davidson, please call the aforementioned numbers. A service for the Phi Sigma 6 will be held as soon as the campus is reopened to the staff and students. Until then, free grief counseling and student support is being offered at the local YMCA. Our thoughts and sympathies are with the families of all 6 young women and anyone else whose lives they have touched. There was a picture of me on the bottom of the page and some phone numbers. I let the paper fall to the floor as my breath caught in my chest. My sisters were dead. My best friend was dead. The grief I felt for them and the fear I should have felt knowing that I was next, both punctuated by the date at the top of the page. It was January 3rd. I had been lost for 3 days, which meant that I had lost 3 days. Somehow I had ended up back in my own bed, the same as my sorority sisters. I hoped nobody had stuffed a piece of paper underneath any of their doors. I hoped that they had gone peacefully in their sleep. I hoped they had been ignorant to the fear coursing through me knowing that I was next. 3 knocks, much louder than the first, crumbled my nerves. The chills running up my spine grew hot with adrenaline. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't help myself from whimpering in short, ugly bursts. I turned towards my bed, ready to leap for the phone under my pillows and call 911. I couldn't take the first step. What I saw stopped the chills, the tears, the whimper, my breathing and time itself. For all I knew, the window was cracked about an inch. The yellow flower, with the 6 pretty petals, was no longer on my night table. The yellow flower sat on my chest end, a perfect spot to obstruct my vision if I were to open my eyes. Not a single petal had been removed. The room had become claustrophobic and surrealistic in a hurry. I wasn't sure if the version of me, who I thought of as the real me, was asleep or dead. I wasn't sure if I was a ghost, a dream, or having an out-of-body experience. I had been vulnerable to whatever monster was responsible for the death of my friends the entire time, and I had been ignorant of that until I read that damn article. In trying to grasp control, I had broken the illusion and lost all of it. As vulnerable as the real me lying in bed was, the part of me stuck staring at her would be the part that suffered. I envied her, the real me lying in that bed, relaxed and oblivious. She hadn't spent the morning pacing around her room, slowly losing her mind. She hadn't learned that her best friends had died. She had no idea that she would never be waking up. If she wasn't already dead, the door behind me creaked as it opened. My entire body felt as cold as my nose had been. The adrenaline was gone, no longer warming my limbs. Something more than fear froze me in place. All I felt was cold. I would not move. I could not move. Each shallow exhale turned into a thick cloud of fog in front of my face. My eyes were wide open and drying out in the intense cold. The room itself seemed to turn gray the colder I got. I heard a hiss behind me, and a large cloud fog flew past my head, overtaking one of my own small breath clouds. I could not react to whatever was behind me. Whether it was out of fear or something the thing behind me had done to me, I would never know. My bladder let loose to punctuate my lack of body control. The fresh piss felt like ice water as it flowed down my leg. It didn't even take a cricket chirping. A yellow blur slowly crept over my shoulder from my left peripheral. As my vision regained clarity, the yellow blur morphed into an ugly flower with one large, decayed yellow petal. My entire body was ice cold, but this time I could smell it. Something like nail polish remover and moldy bread and sweet rot. Holding the stem of the flower was a pale hand that looked thin and skeletal at first. I was wrong. The hand wasn't skeletal. It was a skeleton's hand. A voice behind me spoke, a deep whisper louder than any of the knocks. 6 lovely petals. Does she love me or does she not? No control. I looked at my body one last time and offered a silent apology. I was going to be the reason we die, and I could do nothing to stop it. I was powerless to resist the second skeleton hand as it grabbed my wrist and raised my hand to the flower, powerless to stop my fingers from pinching that last yellow petal and plucking it off, powerless to stop myself from saying I love you not. Story 2. The poet, excerpt from a local newspaper. Men brutally murdered in street. On Monday morning, 96-year-old Truman Kumar was attacked, murdered outside of a small restaurant near his home. He had been on his way to get breakfast with his daughter Amelia Kumar. Amelia, still shaken from the event, tells her story. It had started as just another normal Monday morning. I had met him at his house about 10 minutes prior. He was already dressed and waiting on me. When I got there, he was very mobile and independent. For a man his age, she says, while trying to compose herself. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. We had walked down to the cafe, and just as we were about to walk inside, I saw this man sprinting towards us. He was about average height, had wild matted brown hair, or it could have been black. I couldn't tell he was moving so fast. He wore dark green parachute pants and a black sleeveless shirt. His arms were covered in scars. He was screaming crazy garbage like "Poet knows your sins." I tried to drag my dad inside, but he was just standing there like he was frozen. I'll never forget the look on his face, pure guilt and acceptance, as if he knew this would happen or something. The man had his hands on my dad's throat before I could snap him out of it. The man was scrawny, but he was so unnaturally strong. He twisted my dad's head sharply, and I heard this awful cracking noise, and my dad fell to the ground. That's when the man turned to me. His face was inches from mine. She chokes up. He had a mask on, one of those weird Phantom of the Opera-style masks. It was white leather, with a white lace trim around the edges. It was splattered with blood, which terrified me, even more because it was dried and my dad hadn't bled. I'll never forget what he said next. The spirits do not cry out for your condemnation. Now rejoice in this poetic justice. Then he ran down the street without another word. Police are still on the lookout for this man. He is believed to be connected with several other murders across the country. If you see anyone that fits his description or you have any information on his whereabouts, please contact your local police department. It was a sunny autumn afternoon, although I wouldn't be able to tell you that due to this being the third day I've spent locked in my dorm room studying for a project. From the time the sun began to rise to the time it said I had sat at that computer with my notebook in hand, scribbling down page after page of notes. I reached up and rubbed my eyes until it hurt and decided that now would be a good time to take one of my very rare breaks. I rose from my chair and stumbled towards the bathroom. After locking myself inside, I looked in the mirror. A pair of bloodshot eyes and a bird nest of dark brown hair stared back at me. I hadn't showered in days or had any real food besides whatever junk I had lying around the kitchen. I chuckled. Dad would kill me if he saw me like this. My father had always been obsessed with my family members looking their best. I guess he thought that since we were rich we all had to look the part, so nobody forgot that we had more money than they did. I groaned at my own recollection of how snobby he was. Nonetheless, being rich did have its perks, say being able to study law at Harvard, for example, which I currently am. The only problem was all the work. It was constant, grueling, and seemingly endless, but all of it paled in comparison to this assignment. Now, thanks to it, I've wasted 3 days of my life studying a bunch of maniacs, pedophiles, and spoiled brats who've killed people like they were dogs and got away. It pissed me off. I finished up my session of studying myself in the mirror and walked into the kitchen and raided the fridge for something to drink. All that I could find was a can of Monster. I guess one of my friends left it here the last time I had them over. I hated the stuff, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. I plopped down in my swivel chair and cracked the can open. Time to get back to work. The rest of the day passed extremely slow, and the more I read about these monsters, the more I despised them. They killed for pleasure and for sport, sometimes just for the hell of it. A lot of them didn't even kill their victims quickly. They stabbed them in the stomach or shot their knees out and watched them bleed to death as they scream in agony. I even found pictures, both from the investigations and the ones that people or the killers themselves took. It was a game to them. My grip on the mouse tightened to the point my knuckles were pure white. I quickly stood up and shut the computer down and clutched my head. These cases have been driving me up the wall for the past 3 days, and now my frustrations were manifesting themselves in the form of a pounding headache that felt like someone was going at my skull with a power drill. After downing some aspirin, I retired to my bed. As I laid my head down on the pillow, I nearly had a heart attack when I heard a woman scream, "Help me, Alex." I fell out of bed and jumped to my feet. "Who's there?" I shout, looking around the room. When I get no answer, I sit down on my bed and rub my head. All this stress has gone to my head. I thought that would be the last of it. I was wrong, dead wrong. The screams persisted, getting worse each day, until they were all I heard. My phone was constantly lit up with notifications and calls that I just let ring as I laid on my bed, clutching my ears, screaming, while the screams echoed in my head. I quit school because I couldn't focus. All I heard was screaming. Now I'm going back home to tell my family what I've done and why. And if I'm lucky, they won't bite my head off or ship me to the loony bin. I'm sitting in the airport waiting for the car my dad sent to come pick me up. The screams gave me constant, mind-numbing headaches. I can't even understand what they're saying because they are all talking at once. But they've seemed to let up now, only coming in short bursts that made me grit my teeth to keep from screaming in pain. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a man in a suit walked up next to an exit and held up a sign that said, "Monroe." Must be for me. I grab my suitcase and walk over to him. "Mr. Monroe?" he asks. I nod, and he tucks the sign under his arm and leads me outside to where a short limo was parked. I felt heat surge to my cheeks. "Dad, you didn't have to do this," I muttered to myself, but considering the literal hell I've been going through and the unforeseen long-term side effects of going through entire bottles of aspirin per day hanging over my head like an anvil, I could really use any sort of comfort. He goes to open the door for me. I stop him. "I got it. Just drive." I step inside and take a seat. My house is about 3 miles from the airport, but the traffic ensures it'll take me an hour or more to get there. So I drill my earbuds into my ears and crank up the volume on my phone and let the sound drown out everything else. But then a voice slipped through, a faint whisper that caused my eyes to snap open. "Oh God, here we go again." I crank up the volume the highest it will go in a desperate attempt to block out some of it, or make myself go deaf. Either one sounds great right about now. The screams start. The music does nothing. I didn't think it would. They're in my head. I clench my fists and grit my teeth against the agonizing roar. I feel tears well up. I bite my tongue until I taste blood. "Kill me. Kill me. Please, God, put me out of my misery." I beat the seat with my fist and bury my face in one until the screams fade away. My ears are ringing and my eyes are burning afterward. This is hell, I think to myself as I choke back the vomit threatening to rise up in the back of my throat. Man, this day can't possibly get worse. After about an hour, just as I predicted, I arrived in the shadow of my home. It was an overly ornate mansion that towered over the trees and every other building in the surrounding area. I take a deep breath and step up to the heavy wooden door in which an intricate design is carved into. I reach up and knock using the golden lion head knocker. Soon the door opened, and I was pounced on by a young girl, Alex. My young sister shouted as she wrapped her arms tight around me and pressed her head against my chest, giggling. I felt a smile spread across my face as I reached down and ruffled her soft blonde hair. I walked through the door with her clinging to me like a burr. "I thought you were in school," she said in a questioning tone as she looked up at me. I just, dear God, the whisper. "Oh no." I close my eyes. "Mel, why don't you go play in a different room for a bit?" I asked, trying my best not to sound completely desperate. No, I want to play with you. I began to panic. I had to get her away from me. Mel, go to another room now. She screamed and began to cry, and at that, my mom ran into the living room. Alex, what did you do to your sister? I dropped to my knees and gripped the fibers of the carpet beneath me. Oh God, here it comes, Alex, avenge us. My blood ran cold. I could finally understand what they were saying. But what do they mean, avenge them? They killed us, Alex, and yet they get to live their lives. I'm shaking now. The voice is so sweet, so innocent. It was as if a child was in my brain telling me these things. Who killed you? One of them is near, very close. What could they mean? I look up at my mother and scream, bloody murder. What the hell has gotten into you, Alex? She was drenched in blood, and a combat knife dripping with it was clutched in her hand. I get it now. A red hue begins to bleed down and dye my vision a deep crimson. I feel anger bubble up from my stomach, white-hot fury and pure hatred. My eyes fall on my mother, who was tending to my crying sister. I strike like a cobra, jumping at her and wrapping my hands around her throat before she has a chance to scream. She stares into my soul with her terrified, pleading, dark brown eyes. I counter this by staring directly into hers as I squeeze until I watch the life bleed from them. I hear voices cry out words of gratefulness as they fade from my mind. I drop her lifeless corpse on the couch and discover Mel cowering against the wall, sobbing. Why did you hurt Mama? She says through her wails. I walk over to her, staying completely silent as I kneel down in front of her. Because she killed people's sweetheart, and now she's burning in hell. I offer a warm smile as I gently stroke her cheek, and then I grab her chin and make her look at me. But don't worry, I won't hurt you. No souls cry out for your condemnation. This makes her scream and bawls even more as I stand and walk down the hall. I feel the anger coursing through my veins. I feel it wriggling about and slithering through me like some sort of parasite. It makes me feel so warm inside yet as cold a corpse at the same time. I look down at my clothes. I had chosen casual formal when I woke up. This morning, for some reason, the clothes were tight and the shirt already had a tear in it from when I strangled my mother. These won't do it all, I think to myself as I shake my head in disapproval. The voices in my head will just have to wait. I walked into my bedroom and found the maid inside. She was putting my bag on the foot of my bed. Can I get you anything, Mr. Monroe? I shook my head, and she excused herself. I grabbed her shoulder before she could leave. Take care of a Melissa for me. She shot me a confused look before I shoved her out the doorway and locked myself inside. After rummaging through my suitcase, I decided on a baggy black sleeveless shirt, olive green parachute pants that I had forgotten I had even packed, and a pair of sneakers I had just finished lacing up my shoes when I heard the maid scream. I had to move fast before the police arrived. I kicked the door open, smashing the handle to bits. I turned and began to book it towards the front door. Alex, wait. Another monster is close. I thought for a moment, and then it hit me. Uncle Kerr, the bastard I should have known. His office was at the back of the house. He was a stockbroker, so he hardly ever left the place. I took a step forward, then stopped. I need a weapon of some kind. He's probably pulling that pistol out of his desk drawer right now. I scan the hall and see a wire hanger laying on the floor by my broken doorknob. I snatch it up and pull it until it snaps, and I am left with a single long metal wire. As I walked towards his office, I could hear the voices egging me on. At this point, I've established they are the spirits of murder victims, or I'm just completely crazy. Either way, this must be done. The voices must stop. I get to his office and I open the door, slowly, wary of his gun. He's just gotten up from his desk. Something his large stomach made difficult. "Alex, what's wrong?" I heard one of the ghillies scream. "What's going on, your barra?" His voice was dripping with the Scottish accent both he and my dad possessed. Just like my mom, he too was covered in blood, except he had a bloody revolver and a leather holster that went across his chest. I stayed silent as his eyes traveled to the coat hanger in my hand. He seemed puzzled. "What do you intend to do with that?" I say nothing as I step closer. "Wait a minute, Alex. What's going on?" "Here," he said, slowly backing away from me. I surged forward, bringing the wire behind his head, using it to yank him forward over the desk. He starts to scream and slap my hands as I wrap the wire around his neck. He gets one last desperate plea for mercy out before I begin to pull on the opposite ends of the wire, making the hole his neck occupied smaller and smaller. He kicked and choked as the wire dug into his flesh. Blood began to pour from his neck, although I could hardly see it due to the red hue that enveloped my vision. I pulled and pulled until I heard a loud tearing noise, followed by a snap, and blood sprayed the room. His head dropped to the floor. I carefully leaned his headless corpse back in his chair and left the room. As I walked down the hall, I froze, hit by a sudden realization. I'm a serial killer that murdered other serial killers. Now that's some funny, poetic justice right there. You know what else is funny? I murdered my own mother and my uncle, and now my little sister is probably going to need years of therapy to get over this. Now that's funny. I began to fall backward, cascading into the darkness. I'm laughing like a madman as tears pour down my face. I want to sob with my voice, but I just keep laughing. Poetic justice. Laughing and falling. Laughing and falling. Poetic justice. Laughing and falling. Laughing and falling. Laughing and falling. Laughing and falling. Finally, I hit the bottom. Alex hit the bottom. He hit the bottom, and he died, and Poet rose. Poet walked down the hall into the living room, where his father was arguing with the maid. "I'll handle this while you call the bobby." His father barks or opens up the cabinet to a tall grandfather clock and pulls a lever-action shotgun out. "Who's that?" the maid asks sheepishly. His father turns to her. "The police, you bumbling buffoon, the police," he booms. He groans as he begins walking towards the hall. "Hi, Dad," Poet says, stepping out, blocking his path. Dad is covered in blood, just like the others. But it doesn't bother him anymore. "Alexander Isaiah Monroe, what have you done to your mother, and why are you covered in blood?" his father demands. Poet says nothing at first, but then finally speaks. "Alex doesn't exist anymore. There is only Poet now, and he knows what you are. He knows your sins, and now you're going to die by his hand, and he will rejoice in this poetic justice." He turns the gun on Poet quickly and swings it like a bat, shattering Poet's nose and knocking him to the floor. "You know what I am, eh? Well, maybe if you knew the whole damn story, You can't rationalize murder, Poet hissed at him as he clambered into a feral stance on all fours before getting a swift kick in the face, knocking him back on the floor. You have nitrogen monoxide idea, his father screams. Me and your uncle, we're immigrants. We had nothing. We came here to escape my dad. That old drunk bastard used to beat the sod out of us both. So we packed our things, and one night, while he was at the pub drunk as a lord, we stowed away on the first boat heading out of Scotland. Poet tries to stand, and he clubs Poet on the crown of his head, knocking him down again. Sit down. Listen, you stupid shite. If we're gonna kill each other, then you need to learn the truth first. Poet snarled, but obeyed and sat quietly. We had no idea where we were heading or what we would do when we got there, but we left anyway. That's how we made it here to America. He put his hand on his forehead. Things got desperate really fast. We couldn't find a job. We had brought no money. What little food we did bring we had used up on the trip over. But when all hope was lost, we were given an offer by a polite Italian man in a black suit. A grin drew the corners of his mouth to his ears. Poet took a moment to connect the dots, but when he did, it hit him like a freight train. You and Uncle Kirk killed people for the mafia. Dad clapped his hands. Oh, nice bloody job, Alex. You solved the mystery. His grin went away very fast. The pay was amazing, and we were perfect for it. As far as anyone knew, we had disappeared off the face of the planet, so we basically didn't exist. And after a little accident, he grinned again and lifted his hands to show the tips of his fingers, which were covered in scar tissue. He burnt his fingerprints off. Good God, Dad is a psycho. We were untraceable, too. That doesn't explain how Mom was involved, Poet shouted, getting impatient. His father frowned. Your mother met me a few weeks after I think it was our third job. Well, we tried to keep it a secret from her for the longest time, but she eventually found out about it. Women's intuition, I guess. Surprisingly, she didn't give me the boot right then and there. She actually started working with us. She was an interesting woman back then. Poet snarled angrily. You lied to him. You lied to Alex. His father furrowed his eyebrows in an expression that clearly showed he was barely managing to contain his frustrations. I knew we shouldn't have sent you to fucking law school. He squeezed the trigger, and the gun barked, bathing the room in a sudden blinding flash. A spray of buckshot was set through the air, grazing the side of Poet's face, tearing away flesh and skin as it went. Poet screamed in agony as he fell to the floor. His father growled, How are you still alive? He stepped on Poet's chest, pushing him down as he shoved the gun barrel into the V-shaped concave of his throat. Poet reached up and gripped the barrel of his gun tightly and began to squeeze. In a matter of seconds, the barrel was crushed closed. His father stared in shock. How? In an instant, Poet was on his feet, and he delivered a powerful right hook that sent his dad spinning before collapsing face down on the ground. Poet sat on his back and grabbed his father's head, who began to scream. Wait, I know what you're trying to do, he screamed as he tried in vain to break out of Poet's iron grip. No. Nitrogen monoxide, son, nitrogen monoxide, don't. Poet didn't listen. He just twisted his father's head hard and was rewarded with a sharp crack followed by silence. He looked down to see his dad's face staring up at him, frozen in panic. Poet looked at the maid, who grabbed a crying Melissa and backed into the kitchen. Don't worry. Poet will not hurt you. No souls cry out for your condemnation. Poet hung his head and stood up before he smashed through the sliding glass back door as the police burst through the door. Poet knows what you are. Poet knows your sins. All that is done in darkness will come into the light, and when it does, he will be waiting. Story 3. The Beast in the Woods. I want to set down recent events in my life, because I'm afraid that this may be my last chance. To begin with, my name is Leon Cowles. I was born in Provo, Utah, although I have lived most of my life here in Portland, Oregon. I've always been a rather intellectual person, preferring books and video games to basketball and football. In grade school, I was a loner and had few, if any, friends. In middle and high school, I began to read fantasy novels and mild occult books. At first, just that Wiccan fluff that, if anything, keeps people from learning anything of real importance or historical accuracy. Eventually, I got into more intelligent and orthodox literature, such as carefully documented paranormal experiments and well-researched Kabbalic lore. In college at the Institute of Jewelry Technology in Paris, Texas, my reading turned to Poe, Borges, and Lovecraft. I learned a bit of Hebrew and Latin to be able to read some occult books whose English translations I didn't trust. I also learned the Futhark and Arabic alphabets to better understand various magical symbols. After returning home and finding a job as a jeweler for a local reseller, I started taking long walks in my spare time. I've always felt out of place in society and hiked through the local forests and mountains to be alone. The more isolated and untouched, the better. The Pacific Northwest is fortunately rich in forests and wild areas to wander to my heart's content. Over time, I became adept at finding excellent locations, sometimes shockingly close to civilization, yet somehow unnoticed everyone who passes by. I've even run across some ruins here and there, some amazingly close to town, but abandoned long ago. Nonetheless, in a place that can be found on no city map, only 10 blocks from my house, I found an abandoned water reservoir, along with several buildings left to slowly decay many decades ago. Beneath Rocky Butte, I found long maze of natural caves, totally untouched by anyone so far, not half a mile from 2 of the biggest freeways in the state. On an island in the Columbia River that I swam to, I found an ancient farmhouse and barn, quietly decomposing for who knows how long. The places with ruins are my favorite, bringing a much more solid feeling to the sense of loss and past wonder that I feel about the world. Not my favorite due to high-foot traffic some days, but certainly very close by for me is the famous Forest Park, the largest city park in the world. It's more than 11 miles long and several miles wide in some areas. It covers more than 5,100 acres, and as the name implies, it's almost entirely covered in dense, old-growth forest. It's easy to lose your way along the many miles of winding trails, and more than once I've gotten turned around myself. Despite my experience outdoors, Forest Park is a wild and beautiful place in the light of day, but at night and in certain especially overgrown groves, where the dense canopy blots out most of the daylight, it has a sinister and feral reputation. Perhaps its dangers lie in its many fissures canyons, and steep and often wet trails, or just maybe it has something to do with certain ruins in its depths. There are also occasional reports of great cats we have MT, lions in the area who carry off small dogs and the local animals. What is fact is that danger is present in Forest Park after darkness falls. Once every few years a body or two is found by hikers or their dogs, often old, partially eaten, and badly decomposed. I remember in 1999 they found a number of bodies arranged in some kind of strange diagram over several hundred feet. Even this year, in 2008, they have found the corpses there. My own incident at Forest Park began one early afternoon a week ago. I was going to go hiking in the southern, central region on a few trails that I'd never been on before. I'd planned on being out until evening, so I brought along a lunch, iced tea, my mini flashlight. One never knows when they'll find a new cave or ruin, and notebook. I parked my car at the Lower Maclay trailhead and set off along the edge of the creek, heading into the park. Along my left, the creek ended under a huge wooden lattice that led into a huge sewer pipe and downhill under the city and into the Willamette River. There is a rumor that the Portland catacombs connect to that sewer pipe at some point. Further along the creek is some kind of wooden walkways, raised 20 feet or so above the water, and connected to some old, crumbling masonry and beside the stream. I've read that this used to be part of the original watershed that served Portland, and I guess that it was part of that. In the bed of the creek, several ancient stone walls and pieces of brickwork can be seen to those with a keen eye. Beyond, a bridge and a little waterfall off the trail, up a hill, and behind a huge pine tree, a headstone with the name Oliver can be seen. No one has ever dug up the little grave, so no one knows who or what Oliver used to be. Further still along the steep, rocky, and often slippery, wet trail about 1 mile in is the witch's house. This was once a public restroom, but in 1962 it was critically damaged by a storeman. Abandoned rather than repaired, it's now by far the best known and most recent ruin in Forest Park. It's the stone walls and foundation of a small house built into the side of a steep hill. The 2 basement rooms loom cold, empty, and reeking of urine and pot. Through the long open wall facing the trail and creek, at either side of the house is a stone staircase leading to the large single room above. I climbed the stairs and looked through the open doorway to see what I would find today. The witch's house has a very bad reputation after dark, and as its nickname for a reason. It's said that witches and strange cults perform bizarre rituals here. It's strange that although everyone knows about it, nothing is done to prevent it. But I guess no cop wants to hike at night along a long, dangerous trail without a damn good reason, especially when it would be difficult, if not impossible, for backup to be called in. In under 20 minutes, the tall hills on either side of the valley also seem to have a confounded way of disrupting radio signals and cell phones in the area, so there isn't even a guarantee that you'd even be able to get a call out. When I looked in, I saw that the cultists had been busy the night before. A red chalk diagram of Kabbalistic origin still lay on the floor. A dozen burnt candles lined its parameters, and a now dry, garnet-colored fluid was splattered on the floors and walls. Amazingly, anyone who frequents this part of the park will know that this isn't a rare occurrence outside the circle near the corner of the room was written some Hebrew symbols, arranged in what appeared to be some kind of appeal or prayer. I carefully set down what was written. Afterwards I took a bit of time to translate, as best I could with my limited knowledge of Hebrew, the symbols written on the walls. It said roughly, we present an offering, sacrifice of blood and respect, awe, fear to you, mighty Clippeth. May your anger be appeased, satisfy. The Clippeth in Kabbalic lore are demons utterly alien to this universe. They are neither truly alive or dead by our standards and seem to be ruled by different laws and physics than our own. According to lore, they existed before this world, universe, their own being destroyed during the creation of ours. Two things of this world: they are utter, malignant evil, insane hated, and blasphemy given form, although they are said to be so mutable in nature that even attributing them forms may be inaccurate. Most Kabbalists say they are only a myth representing sin, and the few that believe in them, even Aleister Crowley, would never try to bargain or make pacts with them, for they comprehend no alliances and seek only to destroy and consume. Truly living things. I wish now that I had taken the legends of the Clippeth more seriously, but I thought of them only as legendary monsters like dragons and jinn. After writing down that strange appeal, I continued on up the hill and away from the strange and evil little stone house. I walked for miles, winding this way and that through the hills and forest, enjoying the quiet and solitude of the day. Eventually I became hungry and left the trail, slipping between the bushes and undergrowth. I moved about 50 feet off the trail and into a little clearing to sit down and eat. While eating my lunch of sandwiches and iced tea, a strange thing happened. Something large moved in the vegetation, maybe 40 feet away, off to my left. Thinking that it was a dog or deer, I stood up to look, but saw nothing. A moment later the commotion began again. I could now actually see the plant life being shoved aside and hear leaves and twigs being crushed, whatever was making. The nose had to be at least as large as a human, but I couldn't see the thing at all. It seemed to be moving in an elliptical pattern, circling behind me and getting closer. After maybe 2 minutes, the nose had moved in about a 90-degree arc and was now behind me and 30 feet or less away. It still sounded quite large and was still totally unseen, despite the plant life being no more than 3 feet tall. At this point I was quite alarmed and decided that I might not want to see whatever it was that was out there. I picked up my day pack and quickly moved back to the trail off into distance. An hour later I had all but forgotten my brush with the unseen. It was starting to become dusk, although I didn't have a watch on, so I don't know the exact time I had begun to circle around on the trails and head back toward my car. Although I was taking a small, seldom-used trail I had never been on before, as I was circling a little hill I saw some kind of small stone pillar, standing weathered and overgrown, off the trail to my right. Always fascinated by the possibility of examining forgotten artifice, I went to see what it was. The pillar was a basalt column, about 4 feet high, with some extremely weathered inscriptions on it. The style looked like art of the Pacific Northwest Indian tribes. It seemed to be a picture of a hairy biped that was eating or rending small humans. It made me think of their legends of the old woman of the forest who some whisper was the same as the Sasquatch, a huge, hairy ape which would spirit off young children, never to be seen again. About 40 feet away I saw another little obelisk that looked identical to the one I just looked at. In between I saw a large, low circular block of concrete and a couple of large basalt blocks with channels cut into the tops and sides. I couldn't decide the original purpose of the blocks. The concrete cylinder looked like an old cistern. I was maybe 15 or 16 feet across, but had recently been altered. The cement plate that served as a cap and was almost a foot thick had been partially removed. It had been lifted and slid to one side, leaving about a 3-foot gap to look into. Peering down into it with the aid of my flashlight, I could see that it was about 30 feet deep and badly damaged by the hands of time or vandals. Handholds had been gouged into the inside wall, leading down to the cistern floor. A bed of moldering leaves and sticks covered the floor, which struck me as odd, since the cap appeared to have only been moved extremely recently, and it wasn't late enough in the season for leaves to start falling anyway. I could also see 2 large holes in the cement tube at the bottom, one on either side. One of the holes looked quite large, 6 or 7 feet, while the other side looked quite a bit smaller, maybe 4 feet in diameter. Having no fear of the dark, enclosed spaces or heights, I began climbing down to further explore this new find. The odor of decaying plant and possibly animal matter hung thick in the air, along with the deep scent of wet earth. Both holes led into crudely cut rock and earth passages. I went into the larger one first and followed it back into the hill. I'm not quite sure how long the passage was before it opened into a small chamber. Visually, it looked like it must have been 40 feet, or possibly more, but I completely passed through it in only 7 steps, which should only take me 20 or 21 feet. The little chamber was almost spherical and looked to be about 12 feet across. It looked like the nest of some large animal, with a bed of dirty rags and pale sticks in one corner. I saw a couple of shiny glimmers poking out of the pile and bent down to examine them. The first was an impressive amethyst crystal, about 6 inches long, with many tiny black and red inclusions. Suspended inside it, the 6 sides, although they looked natural, had been polished, and the base had been ground flat and polished as well. Some strange glyphs had been engraved into the 6 triangular facets that formed the point. Even with my fairly broad knowledge of runes and symbols, I was at a loss as to the origins of the symbols. They did look somewhat like the pictographs I've seen on Central and South American coins and calendars. The crystal had another quality that made it odd, unique, and sinister in aspect. Whenever I'd look away and could see the crystal with only my peripheral vision, the little red and black inclusions would seem to come to life and start moving, like minuscule fish swimming about in an aquarium. But as soon as I would look at it, they would stop and be just as I had seen them before. As a jeweler, I have seen a number of exotic techniques for creating illusions in gemstones. Some make it appear to be larger or brighter than they actually are. Some are cut in specific ways to conceal defects, reflect a double image, or even appear to move within the setting. But I've never seen anything like this. Pocketing the crystal for later examination, I turned my attention to the other shiny bit, poking out from under a grimy rag. It was a watch from the 1980s, its spring band torn apart and its crystal cracked. A shiver went down my spine as my gaze returned to the pile and the pale sticks. As I gingerly pulled one out to look at it, I was horrified to see what I already feared. What I was holding was clearly a human arm or leg bone, snapped in half and many years old. Dropping the once human thing, I turned to retreat from this den of evil. When I got back to the cistern, I looked up expecting to climb back out to safety, but was momentarily paralyzed by fear when I saw something coming into the hole from outside. I shut off my flashlight and darted into the smaller tunnel to hide from. Whatever it was, it appeared to be a human figure floating in midair and descending past the concrete lid. It then abruptly fell into an unmoving heap before me with a sickening crunch. Splat. Quite obviously dead. It was a man, wearing torn and filthy jeans, an equally filthy flannel shirt, and worn and dirty sneakers. His eyes were open with a look of absolute fear that I'll never be able to forget. His wild and unkempt beard was a sea of red from what must have been a terminal throat wound. Above I saw nothing. Then the lid slowly began to grate shut. I could see a ghost-like shadow clinging to the gouged handholds in the wall with its feet and to the lid with its hands. It looked like a large black ape, with huge bat-like ears, a fanged canine-like snout, and immense cruel claws on long ropey arms. As the lid slid shut, it seemed to become more and more corporeal until just before all light failed it looked completely opaque. I sat still for a moment, hoping to escape its notice, when a huge weight fell invisibly before me, crushing leaves and sticks. I heard a sliding sound, like a giant rag doll being dragged around, then a nauseous crunching and slurping noise that I thankfully couldn't see. Hoping that the nightmare fiend before me was adequately distracted, I began to slowly and blindly move back into the smaller tunnel. Unfortunately, with all the rubble of the shattered cistern wall about me, I nearly slipped and had to catch myself with my hand, making a small but audible slapping sound. The crunching and slurping instantly stopped, and the giant ragdoll fell to the floor. A sniffing sound, and the crunch of leaves a step closer, and it had been moments ago. I knew it had found me, and my mind momentarily snapped. I would attack the unseen thing and at least not go down without a fight. I silently picked up a large rock, I think about the size of a brick, and switched on my flashlight, hoping to catch the living nightmare by surprise. The surprise was mine, though all I saw was the discarded corpse, now even more reddened than it was before. Where was the black horror? Was it hiding in the cistern beyond my field of vision? Then another step was heard, crunching leaves and twigs, even closer to me. I saw the leaves stir, but couldn't see the monster. Unable to understand where it was or how to fight it, I threw my stone missile with all the strength and fury of my adrenaline-flushed body. All at once, the rock struck the air and deflected off to the side. The small spray of foul black fluid fell to the ground, and an unearthly scream of pain and rage began not 10 feet in front of me. I turned and ran. As I turned to retreat, I saw, from the edge of the flashlight's illumination, a huge ghostly ape clutching its face with a giant feral paw. I fled as fast as I could to wherever the tunnel led. My attack momentarily stunned the thing, I think, and it was unable to maneuver its huge bulk through the small tunnel as quickly as I could. The tunnel wound about and descended over a huge distance, miles I think. It eventually broke through another concrete wall and into a wide drainage sewer, one side definitely ascending and the other descending. I could no longer hear the black fiend behind me, but I wasn't going to take chances. I pulled off my day pack, taking only my notebook, and tossed it down the sewer in the descending direction, just at the edge of the water. I hoped this might mislead the phantom ape and buy me a bit more time should it reach the wider sewer before I was able to find a way out. I ran off in the opposite direction, taking care to step only in the water. To help conceal my scent, the sewer tunnel was about 7 feet in diameter, with water flowing in a channel along the bottom. The water looked fairly clear and clean, except for the occasional leaf of 2 little salamanders and crayfish scuttled out of my path as I went, making me pretty sure I was in the sewer below the Maclay trailhead. After maybe a quarter of a mile, I began to see a lighter patch in the darkness. Another minute, and I was at the sewer mouth, under the giant wooden lattice I had seen earlier that day. Night had come to the overgrown valley, while I was trapped underground, except for the gurgling of the little creek. All the world seemed as still and quiet as a grave. Fortunately, escape was possible for me through the wooden wall near the middle of the lattice, just above the level of the water. A large rock was wedged between 2 of the beams. I was easily able to squeeze through this slightly enlarged gap, being both thin and flexible. Now I was only 1,000 feet from my car. I climbed the lattice back up to the trail, now exhausted, and kept moving as quickly as I could toward my goal. My pants were ripped in several places, and my hands were covered in scratches from the speed of my desperate flight. But I was at least alive. I climbed back into my car, drove home, and collapsed into a deep, dreamless sleep. Somehow I sleep better when under stress. I don't know why, but I do. I thought I was safe. I thought that the nightmare was behind me. A week later, and I was starting to feel better. In the meantime, I had done some reading and research. I have decided that the thing I saw was a clipith. Ruled by the laws of an extinct universe, it seems that it reacts to light differently, being visible in darkness rather than light. If those Indian columns are any indication of how long it's been around, then I would guess that it's probably an aging and may not even be able to be killed at all. However, I am sure that something as vile and foul as that isn't around and active all the time, or the body count would be in the hundreds each year. Perhaps it can only be alive at certain times or under certain astrological conditions. I don't know. The amethyst baffles me. I can't be sure what connection it has to that clipith horror. It may be the thing that binds it too. This world like a golem's phylactery, but it's not over. Earlier today, when I was looking into my backyard, I saw the bushes being moved through, and something stirring the fallen leaves on the grass. I watched carefully, and know that it was no mere wind or neighborhood cat. I know it has come for me, or the crystal, or both. I smashed the crystal moments before I started writing this. Now all I can do is wait and see what happens. Story 4. There is something going through my garbage. I don't know what to do at this point, which is why I've come here. What I've seen has changed me. I don't know if what I've seen is real, but I believe it to be as I saw it with my own eyes, a horrific sight from the darkest of nightmares. I will try to explain my situation as best I can, but I pray to God there is someone who reads this that has had a similar experience. If not, then I will have to come to the conclusion that I am insane, which will be hard. My whole life has been a practical one, and up to this day I have only known reality. I have now seen such a thing as of last night that completely contradicts any of my past beliefs of this reality in which we all live. Please bear with me as I try to explain my situation, as it is a strenuous task. Let me first introduce myself, as I have yet to do so. I go by the name my lovely parents gave me, Nathan James Willem. I am a man of 20-some-odd years, and I have been an attorney at law for the past 4 of them. I reside alone in my homely little house in the suburban area of my town. It has been my home for no more than 2 years at this point in time, and I was finally feeling settled into the place when the strange occurrences began. It was no more than a month ago that I awoke to a sort of ripping or tearing sound outside the wall of my bedroom. This wall I speak of is the barrier that separates my bedroom from the outside part of my backyard, where I let my garbage bins sit when it is not trash day in my neighborhood. It took me only a few moments of thinking in my sleepy state to determine what the noise was. Something was going through my garbage. A critter, maybe. I figured I should probably go out with my flashlight to scare the thing off before it thrashed open the bags in the bins and scattered bits of rotten garbage all over my yard. I arose from my bed, teetered a bit in my not yet awake state, and then grabbed my black maglite I keep in my bedside drawer. I roamed the dark rooms of my home until I made my way to the back door. Once outside, I strolled over to the side of my house, guided by the light of my back porch light, and made my way to the area that connects my front yard to the back with a locked wood gate. Once I was in the area with the bins, I switched on my maglite, expecting to catch the creature in the act, a possum, raccoon, or whatever it was, but there was nothing, just my bins of garbage leaning against the wall with their tops flipped up. The bags inside were somewhat torn, but there was no garbage that I could see on the ground in front of me using the light from the maglite. There was, however, a horribly disgusting smell, a smell that I still cannot accurately describe. You may be thinking something like, well, duh, there's a smell. You're standing next to the garbage. Nathan, use your damn head. Yes, I was standing next to the open garbage bins. But this horrific smell wasn't out of the garbage in front of me. It was from the thing. It smelled like death, worse than a corpse. Actually, like I said, the smell is most indescribable, and it still lingers in that spot today. It's as if I can't get it out of my nostrils, even if I were to cut off my nose. The smell is most uncanny and unnatural. Those are the best terms I can use to describe it to others. That night I returned to my bedroom and lay down again, feeling quite puzzled. I wondered why the animal had so neatly torn open the bags in my bins without knocking them over or scattering the contents everywhere. How did the creature disappear without a trace only moments after me hearing the noises from my bedroom, leaving nothing but its horrid smell behind? It was quite eerie, though I let these thoughts go eventually as I drifted off to sleep again. I can't remember for sure, but I feel as if I had very strange dreams for the rest of that night, though again, I can't recall any of them at this point in time, so I can't say for certain. I slept peacefully for the next week or so with no disturbances. In the nights following the incident, I remember rolling the trash bins to the street in the cool evening of the Tuesday of that week. Wednesday's trash day in my neighborhood, and realizing that the rotten smell still refused to cease from lingering in the air on the side of my house where the bins usually sit. It was quite disturbing to me and I even went to the point of asking my neighbor what the cause may be. Rachel is the name of the quiet lady who shares a fence with me that separates our yards on that particular side of my house. I don't know much about her, honestly. She's young, a single mother, and usually keeps to herself. I caught her one morning that week walking from her front door to her gray SUV parked in her driveway. I did something then that I hadn't ever really cared to do since I'd moved into this house. I struck up a conversation with the woman. Out of desperate effort, I hurried through the small talk while trying my best to not seem rude, and asked her about the smell. I was disappointed to find that even though Rachel keeps her garbage bins right on the other side of the fence, she could smell nothing. I asked her if anything had been in them recently. She told me there hadn't been any reason for her to believe that there was. I even led her over to the wood gate that leads to my backyard and asked her if she knew what the horrible smell might be from. I remember her awkwardly tilting her head and looking at me briefly before saying, "Smell? I don't smell anything unusual, and I'm pretty sure my sense of smell is still intact." Weird as it was, the woman truly did not smell anything. I felt embarrassed in the moment. I apologized to Rachel for acting strange as I did, and let her go on about her day. The embarrassment faded shortly after, and I remember doing a good bit of thinking that day. Why was the smell still there almost after a whole week? Why was I able to smell it even from the part of my front yard by the wood gate when Rachel smelled nothing? It was so strong when I was near the gate, yet the smell went unnoticed by Rachel when she was standing right next to me. Am I insane? I might be, but I'll get to that in a bit. It was a few days after my conversation with Rachel that I was awoken by the familiar noise once again. I remember briefly looking at my phone to check the time. 3:33 a.m. Once again I rose from the warm cover and sheets of my bed and grabbed the mag light out of my drawer. It was then that the noise outside increased, almost as if something large was in the bins and digging into the bags as the bins knocked against the wall. Something as small as a raccoon couldn't be making such a ruckus, so I figured a stray dog may have found its way into my yard through a hole in the fence or something. This time, along with my mag light from the drawer, I grabbed my baseball bat I keep under my bed. I didn't intend to hurt whatever it was, but I figured it is better to be safe rather than sorry. I have always been taught to practice caution, a principle I live by and even apply to my daily work as an attorney. Anyway, with my bat and mag light, I made my way through the house and out the back door. This time the noise hadn't ceased once I made it outside. I wasn't scared, but maybe a bit nervous. I made it all the way to the side of my house with the bins when the noise finally stopped right before I was able to switch my light on. The strange thing about the incident is that there was no trace of sound of the creature's abrupt escape. It is as if the thing just vanished at the perfect time, right before I would see it. I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck? Before the smell hit me like a train. The smell was stronger now. God, the smell! I can vividly recall almost losing my balance as it filled my nostrils in threatening waves. If I hadn't quickly placed my hand on the wall then, I think I probably would have fainted on the spot. I flashed my light around this scene, the beam of light darting from the fence to the wall and then to the ground. When I came to the conclusion that the thing that had been there only a few moments ago had completely vanished, I slowly approached the bins. With the light of the flashlight set on the spot that the bins sat, I could see exactly what had happened. The bin that I use for my recyclable waste was left unaltered, but the main waste bin was left with the lid open and leaning against the wall of my house. The smell was utterly unbearable as I came into close proximity to the open bin. You would think that your nose would become accustomed to even the worst of scents if exposed to them long enough. But this smell is different from anything I have ever smelled in the entirety of my life. It never faded a bit, but only grew stronger as I peered over the open waste bin and fixed my light onto its contents. What I saw then made my spine go rigid. Upon the torn bag in the bin lay a single envelope with my name and address, a piece of my own mail discarded by none other than myself only a few days before. I can still remember shuffling through the mail I had received when I recognized the envelope that contained a copy of a bank statement. I remember tossing the unopened envelope into the trash can I keep in my kitchen, as I have no need for a written statement. I do most of my banking online these days. Though as I stood by the bins that night staring at the envelope, fear surged through me. I felt cold. I looked at the envelope that was now torn open, at the top either by a knife or someone's nails, and felt the hairs on my back and neck stand up straight. I picked up the envelope and realized its contents were now gone. It was then that I realized that it wasn't an animal that had been in my trash that night. It was a person. A human being had gone through the contents of my garbage to find a statement with my personal information and then vanished with it without any trace other than that terribly unnatural smell. I can well remember getting no more sleep that night as I went over the incident in my head for the rest of the dark hours before morning. Creepy thoughts filled my head, and I couldn't seem to get rid of them for long, no matter how much or what I try. Who in the hell could it have been? A past defendant that is seeking vengeance for a case I managed? Possible, but most likely not, judging by the smell. A homeless person, maybe. They usually tend to give off a certain stench from lack of a place to bathe. I thought to myself, even someone who hadn't showered since the day they were born would smell much better than the stench that refuses to leave the side of my house. I was stumped. I contemplated filing a report for a short time, but eventually dismissed the idea. I usually take matters into my own hands, and I didn't believe that my local law enforcement would be able to do much with the case evidence I currently possessed. There was nothing to go on. At least I thought there wasn't, until I went over to the scene the next morning and found the print. I was paralyzed, unable to move at the unsightly print in the wet mud before the bin. There was only one, and it was not of human form, from what I could tell. Coupled with the lingering stench, the footprint was a horror to behold, and I remember having to swallow vomit in my mouth at first gaze upon the mud. The print of what I thought was from a foot of some kind had not 5, but 2 toes. The best way I can find to describe it myself is that of the shape of a pair of flippers used for scuba diving and such, though only one print was made instead of 2. And the head of the flipper had a strange indent that formed to obvious toes. This is what made me realize that the print was not that of a shoe or some other kind of footwear. It was the footprint of some deformed person's actual foot. It was not a pleasant sight to behold in your own backyard, and as I was finally able to move again, I pulled my phone out of the pocket and snapped a picture of the print to save for evidence in whatever case I may have possibly needed it in the future. I can't say I slept well the next few nights as I recall, though there were no noises or signs to indicate the person was back. In my garbage, the same day I found the print, I took it upon myself to order a personal surveillance camera from Amazon for just under $100 that arrived the next evening via my Prime membership. I set the camera up outside on the corner of the roof of my house so that it would capture the entirety of the side of my house where the bins sit. The camera was able to capture a night vision wireless feed that I had set up on my laptop that I keep on my bedside table. It was good quality, as I figured out from testing, but it could not capture sound. This was not a big deal to me. I only wanted to see for myself who was going through my waste to acquire personal information so that I could have evidence to submit to the police in hopes that they would be able to identify the intruder. For a week or so after I had set up the camera, there were no disturbances. It wasn't until the night before last night that it happened. I woke from a loud bang. The sound I knew at once to be the garbage bin hitting the wall of which my bed sits against. It was louder than the previous times, and it came with a ravaging noise. Whoever it was that was on the side of my house was furiously ravaging through the waste bin, caring not one bit about the sheer volume of noise it was producing in doing so. At first I laid there, unable to move out of pure fright. I was paralyzed for no more than 2 minutes as I sat there listening to the intruder on the outside. When I finally broke free of the paralysis, I quickly reached over to my bedside table, grabbed my laptop, and flipped it open. I pulled up the camera feed, and what I saw on the screen numbed my body from head to toe. Feelings of terror, panic, and absolute fear of the unknown were all I felt for a time as I looked at what was on the screen. As I became completely paralyzed once again, I saw the thing sitting in a crouch position up on the outer rim of the bin, as if it held no weight. It was rummaging through the bin with inhuman maneuvers of its dark arms. It was somewhat humanoid in the nature of the form of its body, but it was no human by any means possible. It was made up of a dark, blackish mass of what looked kind of like shaggy fur, though I knew this was not the case. It was not fur that I saw which made up the mass of this thing. It was some sort of black fire, ghastly in nature, that would flare like that of the flames of a fire. Its hands were not hands. Instead, they were a pair of claw-like spikes that darted out from each of the thing's forearms. The feet were almost impossible to make out by the angle of the camera and the position the thing was crouched, though I had no doubt then and there that it was the same thing that had made the unearthly footprint I had seen in the mud only last week. The thing then rotated its dark head so slowly and so unnaturally to face directly up and towards the camera. It was when I saw the creature's face that I screamed like a child, or so I thought I did. No noise came out of my terrified self, if I recall correctly. Upon its face the creature had dimly lit red eyes, as if the light in which was keeping the glowing color alight was of some supernatural explanation unknown to humans. From what I could see, the sort of demon had no mouth or nose, just those evil red eyes that flickered and flared like the rest of its body. It looked directly into the camera for a time that seemed like a year in the moment, almost as if it knew I was looking directly back into its eyes through the camera. Did this creature know I was only a few feet from itself where I then laid in my bed, separated only by the thin wall of my house? Just as the thought crossed my mind, the thing on the screen vanished before my eyes, and the camera feed went dead only seconds after. Nothing but a static screen. For the rest of the night I did not dare to move nor try and sleep. There were no signs that the thing was still out there at any other time of that night, but I was too terrified to get out of bed. I just laid there with the covers covering all of my body except for my head for what seemed like eternity. It wasn't until daylight streamed through my bedroom and I could hear the sounds of suburban life outside commencing that I finally arose. The first thing I did was check the scene of the incident. I puked at the stench when I got close to the side of the house, but not much came up as I hadn't eaten anything in a good 12 hours. I pressed on towards the bins and saw that, once again, only the main waste had been tampered with, and I couldn't tell if the creature had taken anything with it this time. What I did find gone, however, was the camera. It was as if it vanished along with the creature. What's worse is the recording is gone from my laptop, and the picture I had saved on my phone of the footprint seems to be deleted as if it were never taken. I feel as if I'm going completely insane. This was only yesterday morning. I didn't go to work yesterday, and I probably won't today either. The thing came back last night, I know this for sure. What's worse is I think it was in my house, my bedroom. I had tried to sleep last night, but I was abruptly woken by what seemed like nothing at all. I quickly realized I was unable to move at all. I wanted to, I tried to, but I couldn't. I was lying on my side in my bed facing the wall, while unable to move when I suddenly noticed the smell. I started to panic. I knew exactly what was in the room with me, and I could not move to save my life. I then heard the whispers of the thing. It does not speak like we speak. Its whispers were of a language I had never heard before, and they didn't sound coherent whatsoever. All I remember is the terror the sounds gave me just from listening before I felt it on my bed. From the direction my back was turned, I still couldn't move, but I could feel it trying to climb its way onto my bed. I tried with all my will and strength to move and finally broke free. I jumped up as quick as I could, and everything seemed to cease then and there. I realized it was daytime now, and that I must have slept through most of the night. There was nothing in the room with me. No whispers circled the air now, but the smell was there. The smell is in my house now, and I am terrified. I have no idea what action to take at this point. Along with the smell, various objects from my house have gone missing. Candles, random pictures, and my rosary I've kept in the drawer in my bedside table that has belonged to me since childhood. I am still terrified, which is why I am posting this account. I have done some research on what the cause may be and have come up with silly results, such as sleep paralysis or psychosis. This all seems too real to me to be of any natural explanation. I think I am dealing with something supernatural and demonic. I have ordered a set of surveillance cameras that should arrive tomorrow, assuming I am still alive and somewhat sane. I feel like I am living in a house out of the paranormal activity movies, only it's real and naturally much more disturbing. I will hopefully report back with accounts of what I've seen on the new cameras and what I've myself witnessed in the next few days. If nothing is heard from me after this account, please assume the worst.